Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other, using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
Hi, this is Lady C, and welcome to another episode of the Struggles of Jehovah's Witness Women. My upcoming guest, she had an interesting life in the sense that she had 23 individuals that she grew up with in the Jehovah's Witness faith, and out of those 23 people, only 3 are left because they all passed away under unusual circumstances, whether it be through suicide, they may have had mental illness or whatever they had to endure, and it's just really tragic because these were very senseless deaths had they not have been associated with this religion. But please welcome my guest, Debbie Roberts. Debbie, thank you so much for being on the Struggles of Jehovah's Witness Women.
Thank you, Lady C, for having me.
So, Debbie, how long would you say that you were involved with this religion, the Jehovah's Witnesses?
I was raised from about the age of 5.
Okay. And did you ever get baptized in the religion?
I did when I was 16.
So, and what type of Jehovah's Witness parents did you have?
Well, I started out with a mom and a dad, but my mom ran my dad off because he couldn't cope with a lot of the rules. She was very zealous, overzealous actually. They tried to calm her down a lot, but she was just so gung-ho, very zealous. So
your mom divorced your father?
Yes, actually they divorced and remarried each other 3 times, but the final divorce was final.
Okay. And did your dad ever become a Jehovah's Witness?
Never.
Why do you think they kept getting remarried?
Because they encouraged her to be humble and go back to her husband. This would be a recurring pattern in our lives with things with, I noticed how they treated women and husbands and things of that nature. They encouraged her to be with her husband. She could never marry again. She didn't act like a wife should. She pushed him out for the wrong reasons. It wasn't for adultery, that sort of thing. So she would take him back.
In your family, how did your mother view education?
I thought she wanted what normal parents wanted because she was raised to go to college in an age where college wasn't normal back in the 40s and 50s. Her dad insisted. He was big on it. But when I got up to high school, she got me aside and said she wanted me to, middle of 10th grade in the Christmas break for what everybody else's Christmas break. She told me I needed to go to work, and she already had a job with me for my sister and brother at the Kingdom Hall, and I was shocked. I didn't even collect the paychecks. This sister and brother gave her the paychecks, and she gave me a $20 a month allowance, and they were getting $900 a month to her, and I was getting $20 a month, and here I was just going to work from midnight to 7 a.m. every day. It was supposed to be part-time, and I was just so upset about this. And she says, well, you can go into field service the rest of the time. And my feelings were hurt about the whole thing.
Well, let me step back a second. So are you saying that, because you were saying that your grandfather was big on college, or are you saying that your mother went to college?
Yes. And she said my brother was going to be the one that was going to be somebody important, and he was going to get to support a family and go somewhere and be big, that I was just going to be a housewife, and it wasn't going to matter in the end anyway, and that there was no reason for me to continue, that I wasn't going to need those skills, so I needed to work to help support the family, so she was putting me to work.
So basically this is after your father and mother had divorced for the 3rd time?
Yes, and so she needed the money, and so I was put to work.
My thing is, with your mom and dad being divorced, then it's like you were the one that was working to take care of the family if she was taking most of your money. But didn't you say she had a college degree?
She didn't have a degree. She just went to school for nursing, but she stopped and, she didn't get her whole degree. But still, she knew I had dreams. Mm-hmm. That was the point. I had dreams. It was the late 80s, and I really had these dreams and plans, and I think she got worried that I was just going to leave because I was talking about writing commercials, and I had all these big ideas, and I really was planning on leaving. So I think she knew that, and she took those right away and said, "You're just going to be a housewife anyway. There's nothing that you can do about that." And took it right away and said, "You're going to work."
So what ended up happening? Did you end up becoming a housewife?
Actually, I did, but I did work, and I got myself out of it. But yes, I did become a housewife, unfortunately.
And so, how did you meet your husband?
I met him at the Kingdom Hall, and I thought he was somebody okay. He was kind of in my circle of people, but he was 5 years older than me. We ended up dating and dated for a year, and a little over a year and a half, and he asked me to marry him. And it come to find out his parents and my parents came into the organization by the same people.
Okay.
And I got married. Okay. I was like, okay, we finally got married, and things were doing really well. But about 3.5 months into it, he started hitting me, and I was shocked because no man had treated me this way. I didn't know what to do. I just had never been treated this way, Lady C. It was crazy.
No, how did you handle that?
Well, the very first time, I got in his face and yelled at him, and I said, "How dare you treat me that way?" And he apologized the very first time.
Did you ever go to the brothers about the abuse?
I did, yes. When it got to the point where he was just beating me to the point where I had to go to the hospital, I did.
Okay, and what was the response from the brothers?
They told me, they asked me immediately what I was doing to cause him to be angry enough to hit me. And I said, I told him what was going on, that he would just have no reason to hit me, that I wasn't doing anything necessarily except not moving fast enough or not cooking dinner quickly enough or it wasn't tasty enough or on time. And they said, well, am I giving him my wifely due because that's part of the scripture? And I said, yes, I was. And, that I was complying with all the scriptures, that I was familiar with the scriptures, and that I was a good wife and a loving wife and a caring wife. They said, well, you arguing with him because we know you can be argumentative? And I said, no, I'm not arguing with him. I give him what he wants. And they said, well, we know from your mother you're argumentative. And I was just thinking, how do I answer that? Because anything I say is going to be looking like I'm arguing. And so I just looked at him and I said, I'm being kind and loving. I don't know what else to tell you. And they said, well, you need to go back and be like Ruth or somebody else in the Bible and be kind and sweet and loving and all these other things and turn the other cheek. And if something bad happens to you, God will know it and he will take care of it. And I said, fine, I'll go back and try. And they didn't even want to talk to him. And I said, well, are you going to talk to him for me? And they said, no, we don't need to talk to him at this time. We need to talk to you about it. I said, okay, and I went home with it. And so I just was totally hurt. But I did everything I could to be the nicest wife I could, let me tell you. And it didn't matter. That man was going to beat me regardless. And that is what I need to tell women that are in domestic abuse situations. They're going to get beat regardless. If the man wants to beat you, he's going to beat you.
We were talking about domestic violence. We're talking about the brothers in the congregation are not telling you to go to the authorities. They're telling you to go home and be a loving wife. And then the thing about it is, when you critically think about this, it's like you go to the elders because that's the arrangement that they have at the Kingdom Hall. And then instead of them looking at him to say, well, what could be going on with him, they're looking at you saying you're not being a good wife. And this has been the stories that I've been hearing from so many women, that the brothers in the congregation, because this is a male-dominated organization, women are just not even thought of in any manner. You're always looked at as the problem. And so that's why, this was such a great, another opportunity to do another interview on domestic violence, as I know I did one before with another young lady, and she talked about her issue with domestic violence. And because there's just so many women out here that are no doubt going through that, the story just needs to be told as many times as we can tell it, to help women understand.
I was trying to do everything they told me to do. They told me to read certain stories in the Bible, and one of our books, our publications, said for married women to talk to the older women in the congregation. And I thought, I'm going to talk to the older women in my congregation. This man I had already explained to the brothers that he had been on drugs, that he had a mental illness, a dangerous mental illness. It was schizoaffective bipolar disorder. So that's really schizophrenia and bipolar combined. And I explained to them everything that was going on in our lives. They still advised me to turn the other cheek, that God will know, that he will know if something bad happens to me, that he will still know that I was his faithful servant. And I was starting to feel a little bull going on in there, because I wanted to believe what they were saying, because we were raised to do that. But at the same time, I was feeling hurt, and I was feeling like I was having the wool pulled over my eyes, because I had people on the outside that were caring about me. I had counselors on the outside telling me, ma'am, this is not how it is supposed to be. You need to get out of this relationship, because this man is never going to stop beating you. They were on the outside looking in, telling me these things. Police officers, things of that nature. Now, even policemen back then, they weren't like policemen today. They would tell you, we're not going to take him to jail because he's going to get out tomorrow and beat you again. He may kill you. So that was a different time. Nowadays, police support those women or men that are abused. But back then, they didn't support you like that. So I had these people on the outside looking in, telling me to get help, and I had the brothers telling me, no, don't get help. That's wrong. So I was starting to put together that something is not right here. This is wrong. I'm being treated wrong because God is love, and this is not right. But I decided to ask these older women what they thought. And it just so happened I had the perfect opportunity, and it was my first child and my only child. It was at my son's baby shower. Around the Christmas break, they all had nothing to do, nothing better to do, and it was very cold where I was at. And so that made more of the sisters show up than probably normally would have. So a lot were there. Let me just tell you, probably a good portions of 2 congregations were sitting there. And we were all sitting there drinking hot drinks and having a good time. And my grandmother was with me, and I told them, they were asking me to tell them things that they didn't know about. It was kind of a favorite game for the Kingdom Hall sisters to sit around and say, tell us something we don't know. And so it was my turn, and I said, well, my husband beats me horribly, and I don't know what to do about it. Can you please give me advice? Because he's trying to kill me, and it hurts my heart to say it even now. And they didn't say anything, and they said, are you kidding? Are you joking? And I said, no. And a lot of them just were in shock. And they said, you mean your husband? And I said, yes. And they said, have you told the elders? And I said, for 5 years I've told the elders. And they tell me to be a better wife, that he's mentally ill and he's got, he does drugs. And they said, your husband, the one that goes to the Kingdom Hall? I said, yes. Well, they were in shock. They almost couldn't believe it because they couldn't put the two together, that the man they see at the hall is this man at home. And I had to show him bruises on my body, which he had just gotten done doing a really number. See, he didn't hit me the whole time I was pregnant because he was scared he was going to make his baby retarded. That's his words, not mine. But 7 hours after my son was born, he hit me. And this baby shower was a week later, and I still had bruises from that beating. And I raised my shirt up and let them see those bruises. And I think they were in shock. But my grandmother, she knew, and she was with me. They all told me to leave. Every single one of them told me to leave.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
They said, for this new baby being born, you should leave. Why did you ever make a baby? And I told them I was trying to leave when I found out I was pregnant. And they, the question came to how a baby was born, and I told them I didn't make this baby. This baby was a product of rape because I wasn't giving it to him anymore, because he had admitted at the Mental Health Institute that he was sleeping with other men and women both, and that I wasn't going to have sexual relations with him anymore, and that didn't stop him from coming in and taking it. And when he took it, he gave me a child, and that's how that baby came to be. They said, you need to leave. On the advice of those women, I left. I left that congregation, and my mom found out what happened. My grandmother was at the there at the baby shower, and she verified my story, and so did some of the sisters that were there. My mom lived quite a ways away, not quite 2 hours, but far enough, that it was a little bit of a trial and a tribulation to get there all the time. And she agreed that I could come and live with her for a few months until I got on my feet. 5 months to be exact.
Well, let me ask you this. How did your husband take it when you left? What did he do?
Well, we had to sneak out because he said if he ever caught me leaving, he would kill me and my baby. That's a lot. I found out later, through counseling, that's very common for victims of domestic abuse, for their men to threaten to kill them if they try to leave, and even sometimes to carry through with it. You don't know all the time if they're going to carry through it, but most women have to sneak away.
And so what was it like being like, would you consider yourself like being on the run?
I was on the run. We left, and I had to hide how I was getting back and forth to work so he wouldn't backtrack and find us, which he did. And he made a joke out of it, trying to taunt me, saying that he found us. And I immediately moved again. And that was when he wasn't, angry that day. He thought it was fun to chase me. He thought that was funny. And so once he knew where I lived, he just hung out and waited to see if I was going to bring a man around or whatever, I guess. I don't know what he was going to do. I would never do that, but he was waiting to find out. So I just kept moving until he couldn't catch up with me. And I wasn't going to give him the chance to sneak in and find me, but he did find me a few times, and there were little fights and weird. I had to call the police, and neighbors had to intervene. I told every neighbor I was around. I followed all the rules of the domestic abuse at the time, which is notify all your neighbors so that if they hear anything, they can call the police immediately, which is what happened, thank goodness. And police always came and got him away before anything bad happened. And so he was scared of police enough that he finally didn't come up to the door all the time, and he would wait for me at my car or something instead of making a scene near neighbors. So I had to move pretty regularly, but then I remarried, and then he was scared of my husband, so that made my husband was a big man.
Did you marry another Jehovah's Witness?
I did not. I started to realize after I left the congregation, I started to realize when I moved to my mom's congregation, when I first went to the Kingdom Hall, they wanted to have a meeting with me there about why I was going to come to their Kingdom Hall. And I said, well, I just wanted to go to the meetings there with my mom's family. And they said, no, we're going to have a meeting with you about that. And I said, okay. So they had a judicial meeting with me about why I wanted to come to their Kingdom Hall. I thought that was weird if I just wanted to visit my mom and her husband. She had remarried an elder by then because my dad had remarried and committed adultery, so she was free. And I was miffed about why they were having a judicial hearing, so I asked my mom's husband, can you be there in the meeting with me? And he said, I'll be in the meeting. Don't worry. I'm going to be there anyway. I have to be. But I said, but can you be there with me? He says, well, I'm going to have to be in the meeting regardless. I can't say I'm in there for you, but I'm going to be in the meeting. But see, I was feeling scared and alone. These were people I didn't know. And I wanted somebody to be in there for me, but still he couldn't tell me he was going to be in there for me. But ended up he was in there for me. That was nice. We got in the meeting, and they said, why did you leave your husband? And I explained everything. And they started right in, what did you do to make him mad? Same old questions. They must have a book that says those questions. What did you do? What did you do wrong? What did you do wrong to make him hit you? Did you sass him? Did you not give him your wifely due? Were you giving him sex? I mean, just flat out asking the sex word. I couldn't believe it back then. They said sex. And so I was shocked. So that's when my stepdad, my mom's husband, said, that's enough. And he explained what was going on. And they respected him, and they listened to him. And they finally said, well, we got to talk about this. We'll get back to you. Go sit in the front of the Kingdom Hall, and we'll get back to you. So 45 minutes later, they called me back. I had to wait up there the whole time. And they said, okay, you can go here, but you can only talk to matronly women of good standing, married couples of good standing, You cannot talk to any single men. You cannot talk to any of our youth. And if we had had our ways, you would only be coming and going like a person disfellowshipped or disassociated. But since you are in good standing, we will let you continue as a person in good standing. You can go on field service, but you have no privileges of giving a talk or any of that, of answering questions at any of the meetings. And I was in shock. I said, what am I being punished for? And they said, well, you've left your husband and he's not committed adultery. The Bible is very clear. He did not commit adultery, so you have no reason to leave your husband. I said, I'm not divorcing him. I'm not doing anything wrong. I said, I'm only being safe with my son so our lives are not in danger. And they told me that my life was God's and that I had no right to leave. And so if I was killed, God would know it. And I thought, wow, I'm protecting my child in his temple, and if I was killed, my son would be raised by my abuser. I thought that was pretty shallow, you know?
Crazy. So your critical thinking is on. You're like, what the heck are you talking about? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you see how crazy the rules are?
Exactly. It was all, you know, who's going to raise my son? You guys? No. You're going to make him go back with this man.
But it's not even about who's going to raise my son. It's like, I'm not going to go back and let this man kill me. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
That was top of my thoughts there too, lady. But let me tell you,
exactly.
I was
it's like you were born at night, not last night, right?
Right.
That is just ludicrous, you know. And this is the kind of stuff that women go through in this organization, you know. And only the women that are living through this know it, and they're probably sitting out there like hundreds or thousands of them, knowing that what you're saying is true. You know,
one elder told me lots of elders beat their wives. They just have to be good wives anyway. He told me that with his mouth, and I was in shock. You know, I don't think my feelings have been hurt so much in my life as they were in that short 5 years, hearing things that I never knew were true in my young years, because I thought that I was going to be the best Jehovah's Witness ever, and here these men were just blowing my mind with what they were saying. I was growing up so fast in those short 5 years. I just never knew men could be so cruel.
That's why I wanted to put this platform here for the women. And I know this, we've had people calling in saying, oh, get back to, you know, talking about, you know, other stuff that the men can, you know, relate to. But I'm going to tell you right now, there's more women in this organization than there are men. And there's a lot of women that have suffered and are continuing to suffer. And this platform, just for those of you listening and for those of you who don't want to be here listening, this is for the women. This is for the women. And I really feel like no religion can tell you that, you know, God wants you to live like that. I don't care about no resurrection and all that kind of stuff that they're talking. No one should be putting their hands on anyone. And anyone that claims to be a Christian and anyone that claims to be God-fearing shouldn't be living like that, you know.
Right.
And so that's why these stories have to be told, because there's a lot of this happening. I mean, I cannot tell you the number of women that have called me and just wanted to talk. They didn't really want to be interviewed to be on the show. They just wanted to talk about it and to tell me their story. And I'm going to tell you, they all are saying the same thing that you're saying, that the elders are looking at them and saying that they're the problem and that they're not being good wives. And that's just not true, because the Watchtower Society, you know, they lord it over women. If they could go back to the old ways of the way women had no rights, that's what we will be doing. Because in the congregation, women don't have rights. You know, in the United States, in the western lands of this world, women have rights. They fought for those rights, you know, and they got those rights. But when you go to the Kingdom Hall as a Jehovah's Witness woman, you don't have any rights, you know. And so that's why this topic definitely needs to be at the top, you know, where everybody can hear the story. And for people that are thinking about becoming Jehovah's Witnesses, or people that are thinking, oh, my God, I can't believe this is going on in my life, it's real. you know, and no, God does not expect you to stay there and be beaten by a man. What eventually happened to you by the brothers? Because you said you remarried, right?
I did remarry, and they found out that I told my mom. I went in and called her and said, Mom, I'm going to remarry this man, and he's not a Jehovah's Witness. And so she went and told on me right away. And she's like, why? And I said, you have to ask why? I'm going to remarry. There's end of story. I'm not going to wait around forever for the right guy. This is the perfect guy right here. I found him. And she goes, how do you know? And I go, I know. I can just tell. I know. And my counselor knew, and she knew I went to counseling, but she didn't want to hear all that. So, but took him to my counselor. My counselor at the time was counseling me for domestic abuse, and she visited with him. She said, if he's worth his salt, he will come to me without any fight, and he won't mind me talking to him a few times. Well, he went to her twice, and he didn't have any problem going both times that she requested him. And at the end of the second time, she said, he's wonderful. She said, he doesn't have anything on my radar. She said, I wish you the best. And so she said, I'll talk to you guys after you've been married a while. I said, okay. So she released me after I'd been married to him for about 2 years, and she said, you guys are well-adjusted and happy. She said, I don't see anything bad happen. She said, if you have any crisis, feel free to call me. And that was my thing with my counselor until something happened later on. But it was a good marriage, and I love that man greatly.
Mhm. So you said your mother turned you into who? The brothers?
Yeah, she turned me into the brothers. They were at my front door so fast my head would spin. They were just there instantly knocking on my door. And I went to the front door, and I, was polite but firmly said I would not be coming to the congregation for any meeting. And they said, well, we really need you there for that meeting. I said, I don't think you need me there for the decision you're going to make. We both know what you're going to decide. I said, so just go on ahead and have your meeting without me. You don't need me for your politics. Your politics don't involve me. And he said, I'm very sorry you feel that way. I said, I'm not sorry I feel this way. I feel very enlightened that I feel this way. It felt very good to not be tied down with guilt, the guilt that they make you feel. I didn't feel like I had any reason to go to that meeting to be disfellowshipped. They wanted me to write a letter. I said, no, I don't feel beholden to you guys anymore. Your hold over me is gone. That was after, quite a bit of counseling and stuff, but the hold was gone. So I felt very good about that. And I wasn't rude. There was no reason to be rude. These men the men in front of me were still nice, polite men, and, I didn't have any reason to be rude. There was still no reason for me to be rude.
But see, my thing is, they wanted to meet with you every time they felt like you did something wrong, but nobody ever wanted to meet with your husband because he did anything wrong.
I agree with you there. And he was, in fact, it just galled me that when it was come to find out that he was a child molester, they never announced him in the congregation as disfellowshipped because he would never come in and be disfellowshipped. I said, you disfellowshipped me just fine without me being in here. How come you need him in here to disfellowship him? Yeah, well, they just didn't. I went in and asked them. I gave them paperwork, and they said that the secular authorities they said they weren't dealing with anything the secular authorities dealt with. And I said, this is your proof. And they said they had a 2-witness rule. And if the second witness had not seen it happen, then they didn't have any reason to talk to me. My husband was accused of molesting my son at a later date. And I took the paperwork to the elders to talk to them about it. And the elders at his congregation, which was our home congregation, paperwork that was from the secular authorities, the police, and the courts there. It was discovered that my son had been molested by my then ex-husband, and we had to go through the police and go to the authorities, and he had to be interviewed and things like that. And when it was found out that it was my ex-husband doing this, they, went and got him. The police went and got him and stuff. And there was a paperwork drawn that said he could never be around him, things like that. And I took all this proof to the brothers saying, here's this proof. I want to show you that he's been doing these things, here. And they said, well, we don't want anything to do with secular authorities. We have nothing to do with secular authorities. And I said, but this is proof that this has been going on. I think you need to know this to protect other people in the congregation, because he's only been interviewed. He hasn't been arrested yet. And I want to protect you guys in here in case he grabs other children from the Kingdom Hall. And they said no. They weren't going to look at the paperwork. And I was miffed at why they didn't want to protect other children, because my child was protected. So I was kind of shocked that they didn't want to do that. And they, I asked them, well, don't you want to disfellowship like someone like that? And I said, this is your copy of the paperwork. I think I should leave it here for you guys. And so it made me want to go find a different elder to hand it into, And so I walked away from that elder, and I did turn it into a different elder. I just said, here's some paperwork for you guys, and I just walked away in hopes that guy read it and let him muddle through what was on the interview. And
so why didn't they want to deal with the secular authorities?
That was their rule. They didn't deal with secular authorities. I don't know what the deal is with that, but I do know he was never, ever disfellowshipped from that congregation. So he had freedom to come and go, and I know he showed up at other congregations and pretended to be other names, because I think that was part of his mental illness, but I don't know if that was to snatch children or not. It's just scary what he could have been doing.
So all of the people that you knew growing up in this religion, the kids you grew up with, what was the deal with them?
There were a lot of kids, but I had my circle of kids. How you have age groups you hang out with. Mm-hmm. And my ex-husband ended up committing suicide, but he wasn't really in my circle. Like I said, he was 5 years older than me. And he committed suicide. There's so many suicides, and there's so much mental abuse. There's so much mental illness in the Jehovah's Witness congregations. And I think it's important to mention that to you, ladies, see, because a lot of these kids are subjected to things that the older Jehovah's Witnesses were never subjected to. And I want to mention that right quickly. These kids' parents were so gung-ho to do this witnessing and so zealous for this. They raised these children from a young age, this early 70s up, as Jehovah's Witnesses, threw them in the public school system with no real protection mentally from anything they saw going on. So these kids were in front of all these other kids, and they were withholding Christmas and birthdays and all the other parties from them, and not giving them anything, no spiritual armor. So the kids had what their parents told them to say, but they weren't really sure how to apply it. I was one of these kids, so I know. I tried to be grown up and say what my mom said to say, but it didn't. These other kids didn't really understand me, and they picked on you, and they said nasty things to you. And all these other kids had the same problems I said. They were in the world, and they tried to stay separate, but they really couldn't stay separate because the peer abuse was horrible, just absolutely horrible. I mean, peer abuse is already horrible without being so different. But then you throw being different in on top of it, it's just even worse. So we were those weird kids that just didn't celebrate anything. We weren't, and it just made it worse to be bullied. And so to have that growing up, I'm sure, and then to be oppressed in your own congregation from who you want to be, not be allowed to go to college. Your parents never allow you to do that. If you're a female, you don't be allowed to have your hopes and dreams. No, you're going to be a pioneer, and you're going to be a wife, and you're going to do what your husband says. That's the rule. Even now, that's the rule. You're going to be a good little pioneer, and that's it. And now they're telling, all these other things. I feel bad for the children that grew up in my congregation gay. Those gay children, I know that they're living a gay lifestyle now because it's part of who they are inside, but they feel guilty about it. They feel this horrible guilt, and the ones that did committed suicide because they couldn't live both free on the outside and worry about the inside guilt they were eating themselves up with. And just all these other things that happened to these people. So out of the 23 that were in my circle, only 3 of us are left.
That is so sad.
Some of it was, suicide, but I just think it's incredibly awful that there's only those 3 of us left.
And when you look back at it, if you all weren't Jehovah's Witnesses following these crazy rules, you probably wouldn't even have lived those type of lives. When did you find out this wasn't the truth? Even though you went through all the stuff that you were going through, at some point you probably still thought it was the truth.
I did. I left thinking that was still the truth and the brothers were just wrong. And I thought something was wrong with those brothers in those 2 congregations, that they were corrupt. And I thought that's just got to be what it is because my mom's husband wasn't that way. And so I thought there's got to be just something wrong with those elders. They're old and something's wrong with them. That's what I told myself in my head. But then, I went back and some new elders were there and they were wrong, and so I knew stuff was wrong. And then I started to realize more and more that there were, other things wrong in other congregations. And I had heard some stories from some ladies that were also in counseling around me that were also ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, and they were in the domestic violence section where I was at. So I started to realize I wasn't the only one and that they were going through similar things. I thought, okay, this isn't just my place where I was at. This is a common thing. And I started to put it together fairly quickly after that, and seeing how oppressed things were and how I was told not to do anything. Those people oppressed how I was allowed to go do anything about it. Don't go talk to police. Don't do anything. I just really, really right away wanted to say that I knew in my heart that this was a wrong religion after that. I just knew they were doing the wrong thing, that it couldn't be right. How could it be right after they so unlovingly treated me that way?
So at what point did you get the confirmation that this wasn't the truth?
Well, yeah. I already knew it wasn't the truth when I started to talk on an online help group for others back in late 2000, early 2000. There was an online help group that I helped with, and I started talking with a lot of people on there to help them through their situations, just through chat. And then I started talking with Son of Thunder on another page, and somehow I got to your page, and when I got here to your page for domestic abuse, I listened to a few of your articles, and I said to myself, I've got to talk to you because it's been 24 years since I've had my son. I was 24 when I had him, and he's safe now, and my abuser is dead, and I really want to tell my story, but I also want to help women with domestic abuse, and it's still happening in the congregations. My mom has called me an apostate now for many years.
And what kind of stuff did you read on the Internet?
Back then it was chat groups. We weren't so progressed as the Internet is now, but the chat groups were really just people talking to each other back then. I read other people's stories on the Internet and chatted with them about my story, and we exchanged stories and healed each other through chat, basically like an AA for Jehovah's Witnesses.
Because you know what? The society wants you to be by yourself. They want you to be alone, and that's what the disfellowshipping does. But when the Internet came out, everybody started going on there, and everybody was connecting, telling the same story. People were like, man, it couldn't be this many people having these issues. And so at that point, they were able to get a confirmation. But you never read any books or anything.
No, I did not. And talking to these other people just made it so much more real for me. I never read any of those books. I didn't really know about them, to be honest with you. I had not heard them before. I guess I left. I was so scared to talk to anybody when I was in the organization. I was so worried to talk to anybody. They had you so brainwashed at times. You brainwashed, even when you get out, when you're first leaving, you're scared to talk to anybody about things. You're scared to look at another Bible, enter another church. You're scared to call it anything but the truth or call God anything but Jehovah. We're going to really laugh hard if it's a woman up there. And, it's just they have you so brainwashed you don't even want to look at other people's stuff if you're scared they might be apostate. My mom thinks I'm a craven devil person right now because she thinks that's what an apostate is. And really an apostate is just the opposite of what you think. A person thinks differently than you. It's not even an evil connotation with it, but they've got that word so twisted up in evil, they make you think it's this awful thing. And really, if you look at the definition of an apostate, it's just a person that thinks differently than you. It's not this evil thing. You have people that shiver, shake, and almost urinate their leg if you've got an apostate in their midst. That is worse than any other crime you could commit to them. As a matter of fact, some of my friends were so superstitious. One of them, she was scared to death to go set her foot inside of another church because she just knew that if she did, that Jehovah would not be able to recognize her in the church. And I said, he can see you through that roof. No, he can't. I'm positive he can't see me. So she thought if the world ended and she was inside that church, he would not be able to see her. So she was scared to death to go to another church. And even my mom won't go to a family funeral or wedding inside of another church. And I said, why? And she said, we just can't. And she won't give me a reason why. So I'm thinking she must think that same superstition, but she won't say why.
Well, see, that's because in the early days, Jehovah's Witnesses were forbidden to go into another church. But then as time went on, they relaxed the law and they said, oh, no, you can go there for a funeral or a wedding or something. But then Jehovah's Witnesses that were like overzealous and they wanted to just prove their loyalty even more to the society, they decided that they were going to continue to shun the idea of going to a church. Because it wasn't for going there for worship, it was going there for the funeral or to a wedding. So you can go now. You can go to those buildings for those purposes now,
I see. So one of those rules that they've rescinded, that they get food at the proper time. I see.
Right. It's one of those. But see, some witnesses, they took it a step further. They're just not going to go. Because I even had a friend of mine that I used to work with that he kept telling me, Jehovah's Witnesses are no different than any other religion. And, it's just, he was just trying to tell me, it's not that bad. It's not that big of a deal. And then a couple months after he made that little statement to me, he called me on the phone and he said, what is going on with these Jehovah's Witnesses? He said, I have a childhood friend who refuses to go to his mother's funeral. And I said, remember that little conversation we had a couple of months ago about Jehovah's Witnesses being just like any other religion? And I said, there you are. Now you see the difference? And he was just floored. He just didn't. He couldn't believe it.
And I'm not laughing from humor. It's sad. It's very sad that these people are so mentally switched differently. They've been told these things their whole life. They will just. I just heard a clip from the recent assembly, and the things they're saying are just. They have these men up there speaking in so assured voices, and our young people are so impressionable, and it's like hearing your parent tell you to hate a certain person's color. That's how these men are up there telling you to hate a certain type of person that they're talking about at these assemblies. Right now they're talking about homosexuals, but they said you have to hate them and detest them, but at the same time we need you to be nice to them about it. And I'm thinking, boy, these kids are going to be so screwed up. And they talked about prejudice, and things like that. And they said, you don't want to be seen as being prejudiced. We know you are, but don't try to be looking like you're prejudiced,
If you would not have had the problem with the abusive husband, what's the chances you think you would have stayed in the religion?
Oh, I think I would have stayed there not ever knowing. If that had never happened, I would have thought, everything was fine and normal. If I had known my husband better, I never went with him alone. I never dated him alone. We were always in a group and never had time alone with him ever the entire time we dated. And I only dated the one man ever, so I never had comparisons. I didn't know what was different. You know how kids at least date a few people before they make those decisions and have some experience with relationships. Never got that. So
and then they're always thinking you're going to have sex, so you got to always be in a group, and so you can always pretend.
Well, it was just amazing that I even survived that first marriage. And
Well, I'm glad you lived to tell your story, because I'm telling you, it just really hurts me to hear all of these women tell these stories and how awful they were treated by their husbands, and then when you take your problem to the brothers, they want to tell you that you're the problem. So it's just really, really sad to hear that. So I just hope that the ones that's listening to this program will get help if they need it and not continue to stay in these abusive relationships.
Definitely don't go to the elders about it. Go to the police, go to a counselor, go to a marriage counselor or a psychiatrist or psychologist. Get some help somewhere on the outside. Definitely get a lifeline to the outside to help you. They will help you. Well, for individuals that are looking for assistance, if you're having problems, you always can dial 911. Or if you're looking for someone, I would recommend that you type domestic abuse. Go to Google and type domestic abuse. And then, of course, I think Psychology Today may have some counselors that you can at least start with, and they're all over the area. PsychologyToday.com, I think it is. You can find a counselor, or you can at least start trying to find a counselor by typing in PsychologyToday.com. This is for the United States. That's right. Where you can start looking for a therapist. Perfect. PsychologyToday.com. There it is, yep. That can just start you. And then, of course, depending on where you live at in your jurisdiction, especially when you have, like a lot of people who live in the United States, you have a county that you may live in, and that county, or maybe the police officer that you talk to, can tell you where to go to get aid, because some areas have aid where you can go talk to a counselor. And every place, a hospital can tell you how to get to a counselor, and get the information you need. If you have bruises or anything like that, the police will take you to a shelter. If you request it, they'll take your children too. And if it's your husband that did this to you, they'll definitely take you to a shelter. I've gone to one. They're nice. They're very nice and clean. They give you your own apartment, and they take good care of you. These shelters are well funded and well taken care of. They start you completely over. You don't have to worry, and they give you privacy. Okay. Well, I am so glad that you were willing to come on my program and tell your story, and hopefully we can help other women to wake up and see that, there is life after Watchtower. You don't have to remain in an abusive relationship, and, whatever we can do to assist, you can always email us at exjwct@gmail.com. We are not mental health therapists, but if you need help trying to locate one, we can help you do that. This has been Lady C, and thank you so much, Debbie, for being on the show. Thanks, Lady C.
If you've been in the struggle and want to appear as a guest on our show, email us at exjwct@gmail.com.
The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Critical Thinkers.